Okay, so welcome. It's Wednesday, 5th of February, and this is the Metal3 community meeting. Let's then get started, maybe with an introduction round. If we have anybody who's new in and just joined us, like I would like to say a couple of words to introduce themselves, please do so. Okay, nobody? Well, it's anyways not compulsory, right? So let's then keep going with the actual agenda items. The first one that I put there myself is I would like to discuss a bit the release process for the bare metal operator and the dependencies. We now have released the version 0.2.0 for cluster API provider bare metal, but this requires the bare metal operator to actually be deployed. And in order to do so, I think it would be good if we had an initial release for bare metal operator that could be used for the deployment. So I wanted to get a bit of the opinions of the community on like how to do this, because currently we haven't like decided to freeze like any feature or anything like this. Like it's just like continuous development happening for the bare metal operator. So like should we like maybe just like cut an arbitrary release right now, just to say like to have one, and then structure a bit more our work later on to have actual like releases that would be meaningful, not just arbitrary one? Or like how would you feel about like what how to tackle this issue, basically? If anybody has any opinion. Arvinder, I see you on the call. I guess you have something to say on this, right?
Nothing beyond what you said. I mean, obviously, it would be really nice to have a release at this point, just so the work that we're doing with Cluster Kettle can be is kind of dependent on having a release. So I kind of agree with you. If possible, can we do like an initial release right now, and also at the same time maybe have some regular releases potentially when at least some minor or major releases require it. I would be all in favor of it.
Yeah, definitely. Though the work you're talking about clusterCTL, this would mean like deploying the bare metal operator as part of the cluster API provider bare metal, right?
Yeah, so that's currently being worked out. So cluster kettle can deploy, I should say the cluster kettle, the redesign, the new version, can deploy providers, including infra providers. So it can potentially deploy the CAPI BM, or cluster API bare metal provider, for you, but it will not do things like deploy, obviously, the bare metal operator. But what needs to be looked at is can we somehow have cluster kettle have some kind of integration with cluster kettle so that the user with their simple day one experience can have a more seamless easier experience deploying metal cube clusters, basically. So again, it's too early on, but I think its initial first step would be to see how we can integrate with cluster kettle, if that's even going to be possible, to whatever extent that we can.
Yeah, like taking the straightforward step of integrating the BMO, like let's say the output of the customization from the BMO deploy folder into the provider component of CapBM would actually probably not be a very good idea because it has some like configuration required, like the interface on which the bare metal operator is going to bind, and the network addresses and all of this. So it definitely would need more work than just like bundling a bunch of YAML together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the CAP VM side, it should be fine in terms of deploying, in terms of putting the CRDs on your management cluster, in terms of actually deploying the controller. But when we get into the BMO side, it's a bit more hairy, and that those details need to be worked out. There will likely be some additional. I mean, clearly, Cluster Kettle will not do that for us, but there's potentially two routes to take. One is to sort of utilize Cluster Kettle to do at least handle the CAP VM side, and potentially have some additional, let's say, glue that brings the BMO together. Again, but I would defer this discussion to another time because we haven't really investigated this in detail yet. And the Cluster Kettle design, I should say, the revised design is actively under works at the moment.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's stable at this point either.
Yeah, it's even to wonder if it's going to make it by the deadline of the 15th of February when they wanted to have the freeze.
That's a good question. What you can do today with Cluster Kettle is you can do some initial, I think they have support for AWS. You can even, there's this toy or like there's something called Cluster API provider Docker. You can even deploy clusters with that using Cluster Kettle, but it's very early support. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if they're going to make it to that deadline or not.
Yeah. Okay, well then let's postpone this part of the discussion, but just to come back on the BMO release that was actually starting this whole discussion, has anybody anything to object about like putting a tag and cutting a release for all the BMO components right now? Okay, then I guess we just double check it on Slack, and then we can proceed with cutting an early release of the bare metal operator so that we can go forward with this work on the cluster CTL side.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, then the next point, and thank you, Pep, for taking notes on this. Okay, if nobody has any further comment on this, let's move to the next point. It's more like a PSA, let's say, than a real discussion point. So in order to be able to do the work with the pivoting that we are like, in order to go forward, we are going to create a keep-alive-d repository on k.io to store the keep-alive-d image that is built out of the Docker file that is now added to the bare metal operator repository. And we're also going to do some Metal3 dev modifications, including modifying some of the way the Metal3 networking is set so that we can actually have this unified interface naming over all, both the ephemeral cluster and the target cluster. So there will be some changes there. So heads up, the PRs are coming soon. Then, okay, let's skip this work item. Is actually no use there. Let's move to the next point then. Ricardo?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, so so we basically moved all the images to CentOS 8 quite recently. So all of them are now on the latest CentOS 8 version. And there is a problem with that. So right now we basically are stuck with the train release for all the packages. in the images. And some of the features that we are actually using and we'd like to test, of course, are present only in the master release. So I propose to move from train to master again. We moved back and forth last year a couple of times between master and the latest stable branch. Right now, the only problem is that there are no, I would say, official repositories with packages that are actually tested in the CI for Tripolo. So that means we can do two things. The first one would be using untested packages, waiting for the Tripolo current, which is the tested repository to be available. So just use the current one, which basically the first two PRs refer to, which is it's just a simple change. We go from train Tripolo current to master current. Otherwise, there's an alternative, which is the third PR, to use some like hidden repositories, which are basically, it's a repository that use some packages that they have like first line of testing. They pass a stage of the CI, so they are more reliable. But of course, the change that we need to do is a bit deeper, because we are not going to use the script that they provide for the repositories, but we are going to hard code to download the repository configuration and hard code it in the image. All of these, of course, because we still don't know how long it will take from the CentOS community to have stable Tripolo current repositories, and we are basically eager to use the latest packages. I also sent a mail to the mailing list, but I didn't get any reply, and the discussion is basically it is stopped. So I just want to hear some opinions and maybe move forward with this.
Anybody has something to add for this? If not, I would like to ask before merging those PRs that we, if we could cut the initial release before that with the train package, that would be great. Okay, then I guess, thank you, Ricardo. I guess we can move on.
All right, thanks.
Okay, the next point was the base CRD framework for this hardware classification controller by Digambar.
Yeah, so as we last discussed, this is a new CRD we have introduced for validation classification controller or hardware validation classification. So so the PR is up in review for the base CRD, and I request everyone to review it. The second PR is on Metal3 doc side, where we submitted our proposal for hardware classification controller. That is also approved, but it's not as much. So we request you to review this, put these patches, review it, and merge it, so that we can, because we have to work on another task. A couple of PRs we have to push in a couple of weeks. So every week we have planned to push PRs on hardware classification complete, and target line is Feb 10 to have a base complete framework ready for testing. So that's what the point on hardware classification controller side. Second is PR for current boot mode. So the current boot mode attribute we are adding in bare metal host YAML. So that is another custom resource attribute we are adding in custom resource. So please take a look at it. So both PRs are up in the view. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this? No? Gosh, we're gonna just run through the agenda if it just keeps going like this. Dmitry, you had also a PR in the pipeline.
Yes, this is kind of request for review if anyone can kind of help with the review of this pull request. So basically this is about introducing the network configuration for bare metal host. This is an extension of CRD of the bare metal host, which actually introduces additional field called network config, which actually can be used to specify the network configuration in a format of ironic network configuration, and this network configuration will be sent using Gopher Cloud to the ironic directly in order to generate some part of the config drive for the node provisioning and deployment. So basically what I'm asking is to just go and just give some feedback on this PR. That's it from my side, basically.
Okay, thank you. A question related to this. Do you see that this would be something that would also need to be a field that would need to be present in the CRD of the bare metal machine, so that you can specify the networking per kind of per pool if you use a machine deployment, for example, like.
Depends actually. Because, well, it's sort of an individual thing because networking contains the IP addresses specifically, and I'm not sure that this is really applicable to the pool of virtual machines. Or in this case, we would have to implement some sort of IP address management for this pool. And this is like the whole new big feature and whole big story about the IP address management and all that stuff. I'm not sure this is a good idea to put to extend the bare metal machine to support this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. And on our side, we're also waiting for this to get in to after do exactly the same thing with the metadata, to be able to extend
Once it's ready, I will send yet another pull request that actually do the same with the metadata, basically.
Oh, you have the pull PR already? Okay.
It's not ready so far, but well.
Okay, well, if you take care of this, that's great.
Yeah, I will try to take care of this. Yeah, we'll spend some time on this.
Okay, cool. Okay, then I guess it's the end of what is already on the agenda, except if someone has something else to add to the agenda right now. I would actually have a question. If there's some people from Red Hat on the call, like there was a PR that came about like a node reboot for to be able to reboot the node. I don't recall exactly from who it was. Like, how is this coming along? Like it's under active development apparently. But so what kind of solution are you heading for? If anybody can answer this.
So we're kind of changing the design a bit from what we had proposed a couple of weeks back. So it's going to be a lot simpler. So basically, on the bare metal operator side, we're going to implement the reboot functionality, but just using an annotation rather than something in the spec or a separate CRD or anything like that. So it's kind of a temporary user interface until we figure out if we want something more permanent and what that should look like. Because there was a lot of back and forth and nobody was quite sure what that should look like. So we're going with a temporary thing where it's just using the annotation on the bare metal host object. That will affect the reboot. And there will be a PR coming to the, well, the PR that I have open in the bare metal docs repo is being updated. And I will update that PR in the next few days so that everyone can review. But so that side of it is something that we wanted to do anyway, I think, is to have a way of rebooting without having to set the power state off and then on. So that should be kind of generically useful. And then the other side of it will be the remediation controller, which is something we, in the long term, we would like to see built into the machine API, but in the short term, we're going to prototype it. I don't think it's been completely decided whether we're going to try to put it into upstream Metal3 or if we'll prototype it in OpenShift first and then approach the cluster API folks. But that's also going to be pretty simple. It's not going to have its own CRD. It's going to watch for an annotation on the machine object, and then it will use the reboot API in the bare metal operator. It'll add an annotation on the bare metal host object to reboot that, and it cleans up after itself afterwards and that kind of thing. So that is the status of the current plan.
Okay, cool, thanks. We're actually really interested in what's going on there, because we want to do something a bit similar, but not rebooting the node, reprovisioning the node, basically. Like, if for any reason you have a hardware failure and then you fix it with the same, and you keep the same host and your bare metal host doesn't change at all, but you just want to basically reprovision it because the disk was wiped out or something like this. So like looking at how you will do that, the reboot will like probably give us quite some good idea on how to do it for the reprovisioning.
Yeah, and so we're getting outside my area of expertise on this, but I think the folks who are working on that had kind of a long-term plan that like reboot would be one of the strategies they would use to recover. And if that didn't work kind of thing, they would go to something more serious, like maybe reprovision, I don't know. But I'm not as familiar with that side of the work. But yeah, that's kind of in their long-term thinking, but I don't think there's been no code written for that yet.
If you know who's working on this, we would be really interested to be in touch and discuss about this.
Okay, yeah, I'll ping you on Slack.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, is there any other topic that someone wants to open here, or should we cut it short and keep it a very short meeting?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that we were at FOSDEM last weekend, and we have a booth there about Metal3. Yeah, there was a lot of interaction with people there. And basically, we were explaining what is and what issues want to resolve the project. Yeah, making aware about this project to the community, basically.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then if that's it for today, let's close the meeting now, and let's just then talk again in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.